And the mission of the Institute of Design is to be one of the leading organizations of a new type of innovation, an innovation that responds to a shift in the economy from an economy of scale, where everything was about mass production and doing things the same, to an economy of choice, where there's been a power shift from producers to users. We do that by creating methods that companies can use and not rely upon heroic leaders. Well, human-centered innovation is best thought of in the context of other types of innovation. So in the middle of the 20th century, there was innovation in the area of accounting, and there was innovation in the area of manufacturing, and there was innovation in the area of basic technology. And as computing expanded and created flexible production systems, and as globalization occurred and expanded, consumers had more choice. And so now, rather than having the best and biggest factory as being the way to compete, or having the best and most refined business model as the way to compete, that doesn't work anymore, because everyone has great factories and supply chains, and everyone has great business models. In an era of consumer choice, what you care about is serving people. And companies generally didn't want to do this, but they had to do it in order to win over the people who use their products. So human-centered design is a new set of methods that focus on driving innovation from user need and linking that to corporate value. In America, the car industry grew up with, of course, starting with hundreds of car companies, but it didn't become an industry until it consolidated, and there were 8 car companies selling cars. And as the 20th century progressed, that got down to 3 or 4 companies selling cars. And the cars they sold came in about 5 or 6 types. There were station wagons, sedans, maybe one sports car, a van, a Jeep, and you run out of types. Now there are probably 30 types of cars, and there are probably 20 car companies selling into the country. So consumers have more choice. In food in this country, it used to be miserable to shop in grocery stores and eat or go to restaurants. You either had American food or continental food. Now there's hundreds of choices of restaurants. The SKUs, the stock keeping units in grocery stores or department stores have exploded, so that now consumers have so much choice they find it confusing. The main thing companies are doing to respond to this change is to use qualitative user research methods, ethnographic methods, and link the value that gets created for the users to the value that can be created by the company. So, God didn't create focus groups. They were created only 60, 70 years ago in the age of mass marketing to get some sense of the users. They fit the business models that were based on market segmentation and fit the business model of things being more or less the same and being differentiated by advertising and by styling. Now consumers are too smart for that, and although focus groups still have their place when you're trying to make incremental changes or improvements on an existing product, they can actually be harmful when you're trying to create major innovations or breakthrough products, because they tend to normalize innovations. Consumers don't like brand new things. 100% of the marketing data said the Sony Walkman was going to fail, and the entrepreneur CEO, Mr. Morita, is the guy who pushed it through despite the marketing data. The world lives now, the corporate world is now beginning to live in the world that Morita saw coming, which was a world that you couldn't rely upon traditional statistical research to give you the right answer anymore. There's a saying in management that if you can't count it, you can't manage it. But that doesn't mean that because you can't count it, it's still not important. And in the age of choice, there are many options and varieties and forces that the traditional methods of counting don't capture. Ethnography doesn't capture them at a statistical level, but it captures them at a qualitative level. And using ethnography to not give you a precise answer, but to give you a different type of answer, and then use the wisdom of the teams inside the companies to make the right decision with incomplete information and imperfect knowledge is the way the companies win now. If Roger Martin talks about how executives love certainty and how they're frustrated by design and innovation because it's not certain. If it's certain, it's not innovation because it's too well known. And he talks a lot about how executives need to be able to make decisions, keeping opposing ideas in their mind and dealing with the ambiguity that we now have to live with. Speed and flexibility are the key issues now. Let's go back to the middle of the 20th century again, when the method of trying to innovate was studying current products, studying current markets, doing some sort of user research, doing market research, doing technological research, looking at the channels, deciding what you were going to do, and optimizing towards it. That doesn't work anymore. That works when consumers don't have choice, because what you're doing is making something very efficient and then you're selling it with advertising and marketing and promoting. But now you don't even know who your competitors are. I mean, did Sony and Panasonic think that they were going to be competing in the consumer electronics space against a little computer company from Cupertino? They came from nowhere. Did AT&T still exist as a brand? But it used to be the telephone company that has landlines, now it's a cell carrier. That method just doesn't work anymore. The new standard is more like the way software is developed, where you get a general idea of where you want to go, and you iterate towards it. However, we see a third thing coming, and the third one is to do with abstraction. Let me draw a diagram for you. So the old method was you had product one, and you studied it, and you optimized towards product two. And the one who got there first and most efficient, with the best supply chain and the best distribution channels won. What we see now is it's not enough to look at the product. We add a dimension of abstraction. What does abstraction mean? Abstraction says that you start with things that are real and you can abstract them. So a real thing would be an MP3 player. Apple could have taken existing MP3 players. Remember, Apple didn't invent MP3 players, although it seems like they did. They didn't even invent personal music. Marita San did that. They could have taken the MP3 player and they could have done the iPod and maybe even iTunes, but they didn't do that. They analyzed changed it into a map, and product one was abstracted from an MP3 player to enjoying music. That's the problem. And they looked at the fact that kids were being sued for copying music, and they looked at the CD stores were closing. So they didn't go straight to product two. They abstracted it to enjoying music. They explored lots of options. They realized that selling through their existing retail channels was giving people a bad experience, so they had to start their own stores. Look at what's happening in retail. It's insanity to start your own store now. But the store on Michigan Avenue here in Chicago gets the same per square foot revenue as Tiffany's. You know, it's $500, $600, $700 a square foot. For a commodity, for what everyone else is a commodity product, where price wars are the way you win. So here you move from enjoying music to creating options, and from those options, which are to do with products, user value, corporate value, technology, you choose what you want to do, and it ends up being faster. The reason it ends up being faster is this way. When you come up with product 2, it leads to do-overs. Do-overs are when you have talked yourself into believing you know what the product should be. You go and do it. All the numbers say it's the right thing. And then you realize, yikes, the world has changed, and we have to go back and do it over. The other way it leads to speed is you've got numerous options here, so without going back to the beginning, you can pull other things down and act upon them. The third thing it does is by abstracting it into the activity people care about, enjoying music rather than MP3 players, you gain principles that can guide new innovations as well. So although it seems longer, it is in fact faster, and it fills up the front end of product portfolios and sends stronger ideas into development than otherwise go. So that's a description of abstraction and the value of it. When markets change slowly, when technology changes slowly, when distribution channels change slowly, this is static, and executives don't like change correctly because change is risky. But who knows of markets and technologies and users that are changing slowly now? And it's hard to find any industry where they're changing slowly. They're all moving in this direction. They're up here. Staying the same and being more powerful works here. Staying the same and being more powerful is a recipe for death here. The problem is, you know you have to change, you don't know what you have to change to. So there was a way of avoiding risk here. There is no way of avoiding risk here. You have to choose which types of risks you want to deal with. There are bad risks, and there are worse risks. And you want to mitigate them all and take advantage of some of them. And so, for example, it may seem risky, it may seem like you're avoiding risk to do ever more detailed statistical studies of the market. And you can slice it and dice it and get to more refined numbers of what you can count. But if in the meantime you're ignoring things that you can't count, sounds risky to me. So this issue of risk is the biggest question, opportunity, problem facing senior execs now. Their job until now has been to avoid all types of risk. Their job now is to figure out which risks they have to deal with and which risks they can ignore. There was a time in the 50s where companies knew a lot about technology, and a lot about markets, and a lot about their users. And what happened is there was an explosion of knowledge about technology. There was an explosion of knowledge about business models. And the information about users, about daily life, went down. This is users' daily life. Why did it go down? Because this created choices. This is what this, along with globalism, which is a business model in this case, is creating the choice. So companies know how to make anything, but they're not sure what to make. I've had COOs and CEOs of at least 8 companies, probably more, say essentially, in my area, let's say cell phones, we can make any type of cell phone you can imagine. We have ideas